The applause filled the room before I even had a chance to set down my purse. I remember standing just inside the doorway of that restaurant, watching the lights catch the gold lettering on the front window, my daughter's name, in a font she had picked out herself, on a building I had paid for. The smell of fresh paint and garlic and something warm from the kitchen wrapped around me, and for one moment, just one, I let myself feel proud. I had done this. I had helped build this. Every sore morning, every skipped vacation, every jar of peanut butter I chose, over a proper meal so the numbers would add up, they had led here, to this room, to this night. I should have known that pride was the last thing I would feel before everything cracked open. My name is not important. What I am is a 63-year-old woman who spent 31 years as a registered nurse in a hospital outside of Columbus, Ohio. I raised 2 children mostly by myself after my husband left when my daughter was 9 and my son was 6. I worked nights. I worked holidays. I worked through a hip replacement that my surgeon told me to rest from for 12 weeks, and I was back on the floor in 8 because we needed the income and there was nobody else. I was not looking for a medal. I want to be clear about that. I was not keeping score the way some mothers do, adding up every dollar and sacrifice like a ledger to wave in someone's face later. I was just living. I was just doing what needed to be done. But I was also human, and humans, when they are broken in front of a room full of people by the very child they gave everything to, remember every single thing they chose not to say. Let me go back to the beginning, because there are things you need to understand before you can understand that night. My daughter, I will call her by her middle name, Claire, was always the dreamer between my 2 children. From the time she was small, she talked about owning a restaurant. Not just any restaurant. A place with warm lighting and a real bar and a menu that changed with the seasons. She would cut pictures from magazines and tape them to her bedroom wall. She talked about it the way some children talk about being astronauts, with total certainty, like it was already decided, like the universe had already agreed. I fed that dream because I believed in her. I also fed it because I had watched what happens when dreams die quietly inside a person, and I had seen what that does to them over time. Her father had been a man full of dreams he never chased, and that unexpressed life had curdled into resentment that he eventually poured onto me and onto our children before he finally walked out the door and found someone new to disappoint. I did not want that for Claire. After the divorce, her father, I will call him what he was, my ex-husband, was largely absent. He showed up for birthdays when it was convenient. He remarried within 2 years, a woman I will call his wife, who was younger than him and had no children of her own, and wore her step-parent role like a costume she put on for special occasions. He paid the minimum child support the court required, and not $1 more. Claire and her brother learned early that their father's love was conditional, budgeted, and subject to cancellation without notice. And so, I became everything. I was the one who stayed up helping with the science fair project at midnight. I was the one who drove 2 hours to watch a volleyball tournament. I was the one who sat in the financial aid office when Claire got into culinary school and figured out, together with her, how we were going to make it work. We took out loans. She worked part-time. I picked up extra shifts. We managed. What I did not tell Claire, what I did not tell anyone, was that I had started putting money away for her the year she graduated culinary school. I had a separate savings account that I opened at a different bank, and every month I transferred what I could into it. Some months that was $400. Some months it was $150. There were months when an unexpected bill meant I transferred nothing and felt the weight of that like a small failure. But over 11 years, through compounding and consistency, and a few smart decisions with my 401, that account had grown to just over $118,000. It was my retirement. It was also my daughter's dream. I had decided, somewhere along the way, that those two things were the same. When Claire came to me 3 years ago and said she had found the space, a former diner near the Short North, that had good bones and a landlord willing to negotiate, I sat with her at my kitchen table and I opened my laptop. I showed her the account. I watched her face. I watched her try not to cry, and then cry anyway. She said, "Mom, I cannot take this from you." I said, "You are not taking it, I am giving it, and there is a difference." She asked me 3 times if I was sure. I said yes 3 times, and I meant it every time. What followed was 2 years of construction, permits, menu development, hiring, licensing, and the kind of exhausting, beautiful chaos that comes with building something real from nothing. I was involved in all of it. I helped her choose the tile for the kitchen floor. I drove with her to an estate sale in Indiana to buy a set of vintage bar stools she had seen online. I proofread the lease twice and had my neighbor, who had been a real estate attorney before she retired, look it over as well. I was present. I was invested. Not because I needed to be, but because she asked me to be. Her father visited the space once, near the end of construction. He walked through, nodded at things, said it looked nice, and took Claire to lunch. His wife posted a photo on social media with the caption, "So proud of our girl." I did not comment on it. I saved it though. I do not know why I saved it. Maybe some part of me already knew. The opening night was a Friday in October. Claire had sold tickets, 120 guests, a set menu, a local jazz trio in the corner. She had been planning it for months. The invitations were beautiful. Cream cardstock with gold lettering. I had helped her address them. I arrived in a dress I had bought for the occasion, a deep burgundy that my friend told me was the right color for my complexion. I had gotten my hair done that morning. I was nervous in the way you are nervous before something wonderful, before something you have waited a long time to see. Claire saw me when I came in and hugged me and told me I looked beautiful and said she was so glad I was there. I held on to that hug for a second longer than I probably should have. Then she was pulled away by her chef and her floor manager, and the energy of the evening, and I found my seat at a table near the front with 3 other guests I did not know well, a culinary school friend of Claire's, a neighbor, and a woman who introduced herself as a food blogger. The dinner was extraordinary. I want to say that clearly and without reservation. The food was extraordinary. Claire had built something genuinely good, and every course that came to the table was evidence of that. I sat there and ate and smiled and felt the kind of joy that I did not have a word for, the kind that lives just below the surface of your chest and makes it slightly difficult to breathe. And then it was time for the remarks. Claire stood at the front of the room with a microphone, and she looked beautiful, and she spoke with the confidence of someone who had been building to this moment for most of her life. She thanked her chef. She thanked her business partner. She thanked several people by name, her culinary instructor, her banker, a friend who had helped with the website. Each name got a little story, a detail, a specific memory. The room was warm with applause. Then she paused. She looked down at her notes. She looked back up. She said, "And I have to thank the people who truly made me who I am." She looked toward the side of the room. She smiled. My dad and Carol, who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself, who showed me what dedication looks like, who were always there. I honestly don't know who I'd be without you. Her father stood up. He actually stood up. He raised his glass. His wife Carol touched her collarbone and mouthed, "Thank you," and looked like she might cry. The room applauded. Phones came out. Someone at a nearby table leaned to someone else and whispered something warm and appreciative. I sat completely still. Claire continued. She thanked the neighborhood community, the city, the guests. She raised her own glass. She said, "Tonight is a dream I've had since I was a little girl, and I'm so glad you're all here to share it." She did not say my name. I want you to sit with that for a moment, the way I sat with it. $118,000, 11 years of a separate bank account, the tile on the kitchen floor, the bar stools from Indiana, the lease reviewed twice, 2 years of showing up whenever she called, and she stood in front of 120 people and thanked her father, who had paid for nothing, and Carol, who had contributed a supportive comment on social media, and she did not say my name. I did not cry. I am past the age where I cry in public over things that break my heart. I have learned, over 63 years, that tears are expensive and not always worth the cost. I took a sip of my water. I set down my glass carefully. The food blogger at my table was clapping and smiling. The culinary school friend was filming on her phone. I picked up my purse from the floor beside my chair. I stood up quietly, the way you stand up in a theater when you need to use the restroom, without making a production of it. I walked to the exit with my shoulders back and my chin level. I pushed open the door into the October air. I stood on the sidewalk and looked at my daughter's name in gold letters on the window, and I took one long breath. Then I walked to my car and I drove home. I did not turn the radio on. The silence in the car was something I needed to be inside of. I needed to hear it clearly. That silence, because I had been filling it for 31 years with noise and work and love and money and presence. And for the first time, I wanted to hear what it actually sounded like without all of that filling it up. It sounded like an answer to a question I had been afraid to ask. I want to be honest with you, because I think honesty is the only thing worth anything at this point in the story. Driving home that night, I did not just feel hurt. I felt something more complicated than hurt. I felt the particular shame of a woman who realizes she has been participating in her own erasure. Not because my daughter held a gun to my head, because I had convinced myself that love does not require acknowledgement, that giving without expectation was the highest form of generosity, that wanting to be seen was somehow small or needy. I had been wrong. The wanting was not small. The wanting was human, and I had buried it so deep and for so long that I had forgotten it was there, and then Claire stood at that microphone and the want surfaced all at once, and it came up like something that had been underwater for too long, changed by the pressure. I also thought about what my daughter's father had contributed to this. Not the money he had contributed, nothing financially. What he had contributed was something more insidious. He had spent the years after our divorce constructing a version of events in which he was the devoted parent who simply had the bad luck of a difficult ex-wife. I knew this because my children had repeated things back to me over the years, small reframings, little historical revisions, the kind of thing you don't notice at first because each individual instance seems minor. Your father says you were the one who ended the marriage. Your father says he tried to be more involved but you made it hard. Your father says, and I had never defended myself, because I did not want to make my children feel caught between two parents, because I believed the truth would speak for itself eventually, because I was busy working double shifts and did not have the energy for a war. I was already winning by staying present. I had been wrong about that too. I got home and I sat in my car in the driveway for a long time. My phone was lighting up group texts from the party, photos, people tagging Claire and things. I put the phone face down on the passenger seat and I looked at my house. I had lived there for 19 years. The porch light was on because I had left it on when I went out that evening, dressed in burgundy, excited, proud. I went inside. I made tea. I did not sleep. By morning I had made some decisions. I want to be clear about what these decisions were and what they were not. They were not revenge. I am not a vengeful person. Revenge is hot and urgent and needs an audience, and I was not interested in any of those things. What I was interested in was correction. In re-establishing something that had been allowed to drift so far off course that I had been erased from my own daughter's origin story. The first call I made was to my financial planner. I told him I wanted to review my estate documents and make some changes. He scheduled me for Tuesday. I want to tell you that I made this call calmly, without drama, the way you call to schedule a dentist appointment. Because that is how it felt. Clinical, necessary, long overdue. The second thing I did was write a letter. Not to send immediately, I wrote it in a notebook first, with a pen, the old-fashioned way, because I find that my thoughts organize themselves differently when my hand is moving across paper. I wrote everything in that letter. Not accusations, not a list of things she owed me, just the truth. What I had done, why I had done it, what I had hoped for, what I had felt sitting in that chair when my name was not called. I wrote about watching her grow up. I wrote about the tile and the bar stools. I wrote about the savings account and why I had opened it at a different bank and never told her about it until the day I handed it to her. I wrote about what it meant to me to be present for the building of something, to be woven into the foundation of a thing, and then to be painted over like a wall you remodel when the original is no longer fashionable. I wrote for 2 hours. When I was done, I set the letter aside. I did not mail it yet. I needed to know whether what I had written was grief or whether it was truth. I have learned, at 63, that those two things often feel identical in the moment and only separate with a little time. Claire called me on Saturday afternoon. I let it ring. She called again that evening. I let it ring again. On Sunday, she left a voicemail. Her voice sounded careful, like someone choosing their footing on ice. She said the night had gone beautifully. She said she hoped I had enjoyed it. She said she had been so overwhelmed and emotional, and that things had moved so fast, and she was sorry if the speech felt rushed. She did not say my name in the voicemail either, which told me that she knew exactly what she had done and was hoping I would accept the apology that was shaped around the absence of any actual acknowledgement of what she had done. I called her back on Monday evening. I told her the food was extraordinary. I meant it. I told her I was proud of what she had built, and I meant that too. I told her that I had sat in that room and listened to her thank her father and Carol, who had contributed nothing to the building of that restaurant in any material or consistent sense, while I had contributed everything, and that I had heard my name not said. I told her that I was not calling to argue or to make her feel guilty, but that I needed her to understand something plainly. Being a good mother does not mean being invisible. Loving someone does not mean consenting to be erased. The silence on her end of the phone lasted a long time. Then she said, "Mom, I didn't mean." I said, "I know what you meant and what you didn't mean. What I'm talking about is what you did." She cried. I expected her to cry, and I let her cry, and I did not fill the silence with reassurance the way I would have once upon a time. I sat with her in the discomfort because I had learned, a few decades late, that discomfort is sometimes the most important thing you can give someone you love. She said her father would have been upset if she had made it seem like I was the primary financial support. She said it was complicated. She said Carol had been emotionally supportive in ways she found hard to explain. She said she hadn't realized how it would land. I said, "The restaurant exists because of money I saved for 11 years. Your father doesn't know that because you and I agreed to keep it private. I kept it private to protect you, not to erase myself. That distinction matters." She was quiet again. I told her I loved her. I told her I needed some time. I told her we would talk more when I was ready. I hung up and I went back to my notebook. I want to tell you about the appointment with my financial planner, because it is the part of this story that people seem most confused about when they hear it. I did not change my will to punish my daughter. I changed it to be honest. I removed a provision that had allocated a significant portion of my remaining estate directly to her without condition, and I replaced it with a structure that included both of my children equally, with clear documentation of the gifts already given, including the $118,000, so that the full picture of my generosity existed on paper, permanently, for anyone who might one day need to understand it. I also set aside a portion for a nursing scholarship at the hospital where I had worked for 3 decades, because I had decided it was time to put something into the world that had my name on it, clearly, without apology. My financial planner, who has known me for 15 years, looked at me over his glasses when I explained what I wanted and why, and he said, "It sounds like you finally got tired of being quiet." I said, "I got tired of it a long time ago. I'm just done pretending I'm not tired." What followed over the next several weeks was a series of conversations with my daughter that were the hardest and most necessary conversations of my adult life. We are not a family that speaks plainly. We are a family that loves deeply and communicates around the edges of things, circling the center without ever quite landing on it, learning to say, "This is what happened. This is how it affected me. This is what I need," that felt like learning to walk on a leg that had healed wrong and needed to be rebroken before it could heal correctly. Claire came to my house 3 weeks after the opening. She sat at the kitchen table where I had shown her the savings account balance, and she told me the truth. Not the version shaped by her father's years of quiet revision, but the real truth as she understood it, with all its confusion and guilt and conflicting loyalties. She told me that she had loved her father's approval so much because it had always been so scarce, and that she had been performing for him her whole adult life in ways she was only beginning to understand. She told me that she had told herself that I would understand, because I always understood, because I had always made understanding the most available option. She said, "I made you easy to overlook because I knew you would stay anyway." I want you to hear that sentence the way I heard it, not as cruelty, though it had the weight of cruelty when it arrived, as a confession, as the kind of thing a person says when they have finally stopped running from what they know about themselves. I told her the truth too. I told her I had participated in my own disappearing act. I had equated love with selflessness so completely that I had forgotten. Selflessness can become a form of dishonesty. It can allow the people who love you to build an inaccurate picture of who you are and what you need. I had never told Claire that I needed to be seen. I had told her, through years of consistent, unacknowledged giving, that I did not require it. I had lied to her by omission, and she had believed me. We did not fix everything that afternoon. We did not cry in each other's arms and declare ourselves healed. Life is not a movie, and the damage done by years of miscommunication does not dissolve in a single kitchen table conversation. But something shifted. Something that had been operating underground, beneath both of us, came up into the light, where we could both see it. I told her that I forgave her. I want to be clear about what that means and what it does not mean, because I have lived long enough to know that forgiveness is often misunderstood. Forgiving Claire did not mean pretending it did not happen. It did not mean restoring everything to the way it was before. It did not mean I would once again become the woman who gives without being seen, who loves without being acknowledged, who builds the foundation and agrees to be the floor under everything rather than a wall with a name on it. What it meant was that I was choosing not to carry the weight of what she had done. That weight was hers. It always had been. I was just done holding it for her. I mailed the letter I had written in my notebook. I rewrote it first, cleaner, more precise. I told her I wanted her to keep it, not to read when she was defensive, but for later, when she was older and had perhaps her own experiences with feeling invisible in the life of someone she had poured herself into. I told her I wrote it not so she would feel guilty, but so she would know me, really know me as a full person, not just as her mother. She texted me after she read it. She said, "I didn't know about the second bank account until you told me. I didn't know about a lot of things. I'm sorry I made you feel like knowing them wouldn't matter." I read that text sitting on my back porch with a cup of coffee on a November morning, watching the last of the leaves come down from the maple tree I planted the year we moved into this house. Claire had been 7 years old. She had helped me dig the hole. I had forgotten that until just then. We had dug the hole together and dropped the root ball in and covered it with soil, and I had told her that in 20 years it would be taller than the house, and she had looked up at the sky and said, "That's so long." "Mom," I had said, "it goes faster than you think." I sat with my coffee, and I looked at that tree, and I thought about all the things that grow in silence, in soil, without anyone watching. I thought about the 11 years of that savings account. I thought about the meals I made and the drives I took, and the nights I worked and the dreams I chose to feed instead of let wither. None of those things disappeared because they went unnamed at a dinner party. They were in the tree. They were in the restaurant with my daughter's name on the window. They were in me, unchanged, undiminished, carrying no less weight because someone had briefly forgotten to mention them. I am not a woman who needs a trophy. I have never been that woman. But I am a woman who needed, finally, at 63 years old, to stop pretending that being seen does not matter. It matters. It always mattered. I just needed to say it out loud, and then to make sure the people in my life heard it clearly enough that they would not forget again. My daughter calls me every Sunday now. Not every week without fail. There have been a couple of Sundays she has missed, because life is like that, but most Sundays, in the late afternoon, my phone rings, and her name is on the screen, and we talk for anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour and a half. She tells me about the restaurant. I tell her about my week. Last month, she asked me to come in on a Tuesday, off hours, and when I arrived, the chef had made a meal for just the two of us at a table near the window, and there was a framed photo on the wall that she had not told me about, a photograph of the two of us from the day she signed the lease, both of us standing outside the building with our arms around each other, squinting in the sunlight, and below it a small placard that said, simply, "Built with love and with her." I stood in front of that frame for a long time. I did not say anything. I did not need to. Some things, when they finally arrive, are quieter than you expected. They do not arrive with fanfare or apology or drama. They arrive the way the truth usually arrives, which is quietly and a little late and more welcome for the waiting. Where are you watching from today? And if you have ever given everything to someone only to feel invisible in return, I want to hear from you. Because I have learned, more than anything else from this chapter of my life, that the women who feel this way are not rare, and that we have been silent long enough. If this story reached you, please stay with me. There is more to come, and this time I am not going anywhere quietly.